Okay, so Jeff, tell me a little bit about your experience with the Ridgeview Church and their stance on marriage.
So it's interesting that you say this, Brandon, and I wanted to talk about this because I've seen you talk about the issue of churches, how weak churches are. So Ridgeview Church, this is in Rockwall, Texas, Ridgeview Church. The pastor there is Matt Geisinger. The executive administrative pastor was David Shepard. I don't know if he left or he got fired or something like that, but he was a little bit of, in my opinion, he was a little bit of a hothead. So I don't know, maybe he left because of that reason. But they knew, when, going through the no-fault divorce, the church knew what was going on. Matt would not, I asked Matt to please meet with my ex-wife, and he wouldn't do so because he's got a policy against it. But his wife was meeting with my ex-wife, and I've heard a bunch of different stories. But what really disappointed me about this church, and this is Ridgeview Church, they claim to be a biblical church. They had VBS going on, and Brandon, I thought this is a situation. She's filing for divorce. She's sinning. Everybody knew that she was in the wrong about doing this stuff. Like I said, her parents, her sisters, they were all telling her, don't do this, don't do this. Some of the church members were telling her the same.
When you say don't do this, do you mean don't get a divorce?
Right.
But the pastor of the church didn't say don't get a divorce, didn't do any type of counseling, anything like that.
So what he told me was this. He said that he had never ever advised for a divorce ever in his life. And I just said, and his wife, again, was speaking with my ex-wife at that time. I think actually I think the pastor's wife was actually probably a better person to do this than him, because I think that she had a little bit more like moral backbone. Because during the time this was going on, and like I said, Brandon, you file for divorce, and I'm trying to get things reconciled, and she has an attorney in there, and her father, who was a minister, I paid for him to come up from, in fact, her father was the minister that married us. At least I thought he was a minister. I later found out, I'm pretty sure he was a fake minister. He really wasn't ordained. He was ordained at one time, but when I tried to talk to his ordination, the people that ordained him, they said he was no longer with them, but he acted as a minister underneath that license, if that is the case. But anyway, I tried to say, listen, if she's going through this, would you let her teach in VBS, Vacation Bible School, if she was involved in adultery? Would you let her teach under these circumstances? Divorce is a sin. What? Why are you letting her do this? And what happened is, so they chose to tell her that she could not teach, but she could still serve in it. They're trying to how do we be comforting with somebody who's committing a sin against God, against family, against everybody else? And, so we need to somehow coddle them. And had the church stood strong, I believe that it may have been a slap in her face. If the church said, listen, I'm sorry, Miss Wagner, her name was Morgan at the time, I'm sorry, Miss Morgan, if you do this, you can attend, but you cannot serve in any of these ministries. And this is typical practices for a lot of churches. If you're going through a divorce, the number one relationship that you should have, other than God, is with your family. Your church is secondary. I don't care how much you need somebody to serve in the church. If you are leaving your family, you should be told you need to get out of ministry and get your family life right. And I've gone to other churches, and that's their position. Ridgeview Church, maybe it was their position, but they certainly didn't enforce that very well.
Well, isn't that outlined in the Bible? Is it Corinthians? That even a man needs to be married and not divorced in order to serve as a deacon or
so if you look
an elder?
If you look at 1 Timothy, there are qualifications as far as to be an elder or a deacon, and one of them being the husband of one wife.
Okay.
So there's different interpretations to that, but yes, so if you're married to two people, well, that's probably not a good thing, right? Or and some people say, well, what about the issue of divorce? There are interpretations with this, but I would say that the reality is, number one, divorce goes against the will of God, period. If you look on the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus is talking about lusting after somebody. He's talking about murder, different things like that. He talks about issues of divorce,
Well, did you were speaking about experience with other churches. I want you to talk, can you at least tell us a little bit about that? But first tell us, about marriage to begin with? Was it a state institution or a church institution?
No, it was completely a church institution. So my ex-wife and I met up at Bible College, Prairie Bible College in Three Hills, Alberta, Canada. We were both up there because we were going to go into missions. And her parents were missionaries. They served as missionaries in Mexico. I went up there because I didn't know what to do, but I wanted to serve God somehow. And I mean, look, I was so naive at the time, Brand. I was 22 years old. I'm like, I'm coming up here to become a missionary. What program do you want to be in? I'm like, I came up here to be a missionary. So I said, what's the hardest? And they said this one. I said, okay, that's the one. I'll choose. So that's where. I mean, I was completely lost. 22 years old. She was up there from Mexico, and her parents were down there, missionaries in Mexico. So she was going to go up there, and then she eventually wanted to go back down to Mexico. Well, we knew of each other, and there's a whole lot of stories you can tell about Bible college, but I'm not going to go there. But anyway, we did get engaged. My senior year, she was already out, and then we were going to get married. And it was her father, actually, her minister father, who performed the ceremony. He was a pastor up at South Hill Bible Church in Spokane, Washington. At least, and when I said that, I thought he was a pastor. So he was never really ordained like through an ordination board. But what will happen is some missions will actually ordain you when you're serving with them. So he first served with New Tribes Mission, and it's now called Ethnos 360. And during that time, they had a Bible school there, and they ordained him for ministry. Now he left that mission, and when he left the mission, that's when he gave away his ordination, and he went to another mission. And I talked with that mission because it's down in Dallas. I called them up about this, and they said, well, no, we don't ordain people. If they have the ordination, then we'll accept it. So maybe he somehow, tried to sneak things in that way. But it was very, probably a little bit deceptive if that were the case. But what happened was, what I've always said is this: if you are a pastor and if you marry somebody, you need to be there for them. You have a responsibility and obligation that if you are marrying two people, you're marrying them in the name of Jesus Christ. And our marriage was 100% in the name of Jesus Christ. I was the one who actually gave him the sermon, because talking about building on Christ and that firm foundation. And he took 2 of my 3 points, and he didn't do the third one, which was good. He was going on a little bit too far anyway. But anyway, that was okay. But you marry because you think, okay, I'm going to marry somebody who's a Christian lady. We both go to a Bible college. You're trying to get the best that you can. You're both committed to the long-term goal that, my parents went through a divorce. I hated divorce. When they went through a divorce, I had thoughts of committing suicide to get back at one of my parents.
But you saw divorce.
Right.
How it destroyed you and destroyed your family, and
right.
You were trying to do something different.
Absolutely. I wanted to make sure that was not going to be the case.
Now, churches are supposed to be, in my understanding, churches were kind of the founding institution that they existed in the United States prior to the government.
Right, yeah.
And they were built on strong families, strong churches.
Right, and one of the reasons people came to America was for religious freedom, right? And so you're right, and there's a whole lot of other history you can go into with this, but the reality is, if you look at the Bible itself, the Bible has a teaching about marriage and divorce. And the early church fathers thought of divorce as being a huge sin. It was not even permitted. And the New Testament speaks about the same thing. If your spouse decides to abandon the faith, you can let them go and be at peace. You can get divorced in the case of adultery, and some might say domestic violence, but that's not specifically addressed, but that could be included. But whether that actually has to take place or not is another issue. Yes, it's permitted, but the goal always still is reconciliation. When you marry before God and you take somebody for better or for worse, sometimes the worst is that, either you or your spouse does something that's really, really bad. But the family is the place, as we've talked about earlier today, that we should learn how to function have our children function, knowing how to live in society. This is the first society. The primal society is the family. You destroy that society, kids don't know how to operate in many instances in a larger society. So when you destroy the family, you destroy the society. And the church should be the protector of that, because with the church, when you look at marriage, marriage is the symbolic relationship between Jesus Christ and the church. This is a big, big deal. You know, Jesus Christ never abandons the church. The church may abandon him, but he does not abandon the church. So what does that signify? Somehow there's the permanence there. It's supposed to be signifying our relationship with salvation and everything else. So I can look at that and say, you know what? The idea of marriage is that it's supposed to be permanent. God has specifically said that. Jesus Christ said that. The Apostle Paul said that. You know, we try to look at, well, there's an exception clause in here. Oh, everything's an exception now. That's nonsense. And when you have a church like Ridgeview Church, and again, the pastor's name is Matt Geisinger, he told me, oh, I've never ever counseled divorce. Well, why didn't you do anything? And
well, so he's not counseling, but let me ask you something. If he's not counseling for divorce, is he counseling for the marriage to remain intact?
that is a good question, because Matt has been a little bit waffling on some things. Because afterwards, you know, I went up to him, and later on he apologized to me. He said, we should have done more. We should have done more. So I took it at that. But then after he did all of that stuff, he married my daughter, and he let my ex-wife's new husband give her away, and he knew who I was. He knew that I was a person who also served God. And Matt Geisinger married my daughter. And I was not even invited to the wedding. And Matt Geisinger should have said something. So I don't really have a lot of fondness for them. And the elder board, I wrote to the elder board, and that's what I have right here, is the letter that I wrote to Matt first and to the elder board, because I said this was dereliction of his duties. And I'm not blaming him for the divorce, but I'm saying that as the church, you should not be siding with the person who is sinning. If I'm a homosexual, see, they have this statement that they don't perform same-sex marriage, but they permit opposite-sex divorce. You can't have both of those things, and that's where, now I will say this to their credit, I think, because I mean, I went after them a little bit, and they now have a re-engage class in here, and it's designed to help couples that are in trouble stay married. Now, I don't know if that had anything to do with what I said. Maybe they had it before then, I don't know, but I think that it probably came about after that, because they had 2 divorces within like a couple of months of each other. So I asked them, I said, what is a social club? You know, Are you preaching the gospel? What are you preaching over there that you're allowing divorce to take place like this?
Well, that's my question, is that has been a theme that I have been bringing up.
Right.
If something is wrong and we do not speak out,
right,
we're now complicit in this crime against our own society.
Absolutely. And we're also denying the gospel of Jesus Christ. So that's what I would say. The pastor and the elders should have taken a very strong stand. And then I find out afterwards, you know, like I said, within 17 days after my ex-wife got her divorce, she's in a Facebook friendship with the guy who's now her husband. Well, what happened with him, and this was one church that probably responded a little bit better, because I found out about this. I was still hoping for some type of reconciliation. I thought the divorce never should have happened. My ex-wife's parents, who blamed her for the divorce, decided they had to start, you know, camping around each other, and then they started to attack me over the whole thing. I said, you need to apologize to my... See, they put something into place that they were going to make money after the divorce. And I have the correspondence of that as well. So I'm saying, you are the people that married us. You are my children's grandparents, and you helped to destroy a family. You facilitated divorce. You provided, what, $40,000 to take this because you could make interest off of this money? And they're trying to say, well, we're innocent. We did everything according to our conscience. They're so full of crap. And that's why I said, you know, you never should have been doing this stuff. But there's a lot of complications here and everything, but I wanted to say that what you've been saying, has the church been silent on issues that it should be speaking out on and standing strong on? Absolutely. And because we're not standing strong on the sanctity of marriage, that's why we're having some of these issues, like say with same-sex marriage. Well, we're against same-sex marriage. Okay, you're against same-sex marriage, but you're silent on heterosexual divorce. What causes more damage in society? You know, you have 1 million children a year who are children of divorce, and you're going to say, oh, we will have to help minister to them later. No, you get in there, and especially in many of the cases where the divorce never should take place, you throw yourself in there. You know, back in Genesis, when after Cain killed Abel, and you know, where's Abel? Am I my brother's keeper? Well, yes, you are. And when you're part of the church, like it or not, sometimes your responsibility, if you're an elder, if you're a pastor, and especially if somebody comes to you, Pastor Matt, you get in their face and you say, you know what, I'm sorry, this is sin. We will not countenance this. And again, I mean, at this point, maybe they've started to correct some of these things. But the problem was this, Brandon, is that afterwards, you know about my grandchildren, and you know, I was accused of something because CPS got involved, and CPS blamed me. CPS let me hang out to dry for something that I didn't do. I was out of state. And I have not seen my grandchildren for over 5 years right now. My ex-wife went to the court, committed perjury, and I have the transcripts. She said that I would kill, that I might kill my grandchildren. And yet she was the one that wanted my oldest grandchild to be adopted out. And I've got all the correspondence to this. She was the one who said, you know, Stephanie's pregnant, can you take her? Can you help out? And then she's claiming that I'm this violent person, that she had to protect Stephanie. I mean, it was absolutely ridiculous. So I came to this church again on a Saturday night. It's Saturday night right now. And you know, Saturday evening services, they're not well attended. So I came in, I sat in the back, very peacefully, very quietly. They didn't even know I was there. Pastor Pat didn't even know I was there. And then at the end of the service, I went up to him because I tried to ask him if he would please see my ex-wife because of some of the stuff that she did. I was in the position, I'm like, do I keep my daughter on insurance, not on insurance? And I begged him to go do that. And what did he do? Pastor Matt attacked me. And the other pastor, David Shepard, like I said, that angry, hot-headed pastor as far as I'm concerned, you know, he said, if you ever come back in here again, and I was not doing anything wrong, if you ever come back in here again, you could be arrested for trespassing. And anyway, we've got to get going.
No, so Jeff, I have a question. Are you not, doesn't Matthew instruct us
to go to the church?
To go to the church,
right,
to settle disputes with our brother and sister?
See, for Christians, it is actually forbidden for us to take another brother or sister to court. You are supposed to suffer the wrong, and instead of taking a person, a brother or a sister, to an unbelieving judge. That is the role of the church. And that's why I went to the church. And the church miserably failed. This church here, Ridgeview Church, miserably failed. But this is not the only one. And people say, well, now you're just bitter at the church, you're blaming the church. What I'm saying is this.
But let me ask you this,
sure,
Jeff.
Yeah.
2 questions. One, how relevant is the church today? How relevant is the church? And because in my view, they are irrelevant. And the reason they're irrelevant is because of this. So I'm almost answering my own question, but how do you feel about that?
So that's a very good question. There's a lot of times that I think the church does a lot of good, but one person told it to me like this: the church does good, the church does not do difficult. And so when it comes down to family issues, they're like, well, it's just a little bit too difficult for us to do. But, you know, I get the feeling with the church, because again, I'm a member of the church. I'm a Christian. I've been in missions. I've been in the ministry, stuff like I went to Bible college. I went to seminary. You know, I'm still committed to Christ and everything, in spite of the fact that the church has been, I think, pretty bad. I get the idea like the church has just gone to the nail salon and has just gotten a brand new set of nails done and does not want to get their hands dirty. But in order to be the church, you have to get your hands dirty. Look, Jesus was a friend of sinners and stuff like that. And that was one of the scandals. He's a friend of sinners. Well, look at this prostitute came up to Jesus. But the thing is that when we offer the gospel, we have to be willing to give it to all people. And what you said about the ministry of reconciliation, it says that God was in Jesus Christ reconciling the world to himself, and he's given us the ministry of reconciliation. So if you have something against your brother or your sister, you are supposed to take it to the court, to the church. And first off, you're supposed to go to your brother or sister. And if that doesn't work, you take one other person with you because you want to have everything confirmed that this actually took place, and then you go to the church. And if the church sees that that person is not repenting of their sins, the church treat it like that person's not even a Christian. I'm sorry, but you are outside of grace. You need to act according to Christianity. Well, what churches are doing right now with the divorce issue, they're like, well, it's a private issue. Well, they couldn't work it out. The church is actually, it is what one person called the scandal of the evangelical conscience. Divorce is the scandal of the evangelical conscience, because our divorce rates right now are as high, some cases higher, than what you find in the community.
In secular society.
Right. And then you have people that have been divorced and remarried and divorced, and they're in positions of leadership. Now, as you mentioned, Brandon, I've been divorced, I'm remarried. What I think for me, and I may be wrong in this interpretation, what I said, okay, if you get divorced, you don't have to remarry. If you remarry, I think you disqualify yourself from leadership positions. So I've said, okay, I cannot meet the standard in 1 Timothy chapter 3 or chapter 5, the eldership. So to me, I said, okay, it means I will never be an elder. And an elder is really, a good elder is something difficult to come by, and it's something that's you have a lot of responsibility, so that's fine. It does not mean that we cannot still advocate for good, that we cannot find a ministry outside of the church. That's not what I'm saying, but as a church leader, I think for myself that I'm disqualified because of the whole thing about the divorce and remarriage. And other people may differ with me, and that's fine, but that's where my conscience is on it with my studying of the scriptures. So, but the thing is that because I'm not an elder does not mean I cannot be my brother's keeper. And what I found, Brandon, and I think you did too, that when you go through some of these things, you become more aware of what other people are going through. And I think that sometimes you get beaten down, and if you come out of it, not everybody does, but if you come out of it, God can use that to minister additional grace to other people.
A question that I have as far as you being disqualified because of divorce and remarriage.
Right.
Biblically, a man can issue a certificate of divorce to his wife.
Right.
But in the feminist, socialist, secular construct we now have in America, the woman leaves.
Right. Right.
So you had no choice in the divorce.
Right. Right.
So I understand your position.
Right.
And I get it. I have actually thought that way myself. But as I hear you speak here today, it makes me question, how are we the sinner if we chose reconciliation,
right,
and we were forced into a divorce?
Right.
Because it goes on to say, Peter goes on to say and tell us that if you, or maybe it's Paul, but he says, if you cannot control your sexual desires, then you're better to marry than to continue in sin.
Yeah. And see, so here's the thought process that I went through, Brandon. Number one, first off, I'll tell you that I've lived in the Middle East as a missionary. So basically the Middle Eastern culture is a very man-centered society. So there are certain things that are male privileged that I think that probably are in the biblical narrative. It's culture and biblical teaching together, because the biblical teaching is what? That marriage is supposed to be the symbol of Christ's love for the church. Man should never be leaving his or her wife. And I think the giving of the certificate is to protect the wife from being abused. Because look, that's my perspective. It may be wrong, but the thing is this, is that in that culture, if you're a woman, if you're divorced, what do? Because there's a lot of other dynamics that are there that make life very difficult for a woman. So what you're saying is, you're giving her this to say, listen, I divorced her. This is not on her. In our courts today, they don't do that. They pretend it's no fault, and then the no fault person who was at fault now starts to lie about the other person. Oh, he hit me. Well, I thought it was really that you did. No. So to me, I think that it's a big deal. As far as leadership is concerned in the church, again, it's better to be sinned against than to sin against somebody else. For my conscience, what I said is coming to the conclusion, looking at everything I did, that trying to put scripture together, I just said I felt that I was disqualified from church leadership. And you go through divorce and you come out of it, you don't come out of it unscathed. You did not come out of it unscathed. So, some people could say, well, you didn't come out of it. So, well, you know what? I survived it. But
Well, thank you for your commitment to carry on, to pass the torch, to share the message.
Yeah.
And to help other men who have gone through this no-fault divorce, and to kind of clear up that shame.
Yeah.
And that it's placed on men who are shunned in society.
Yeah.
For not being able to maintain a relationship with their wife without it being it being against their conscience and their will.
Yeah, and I want to thank you for the opportunity as well too. Like I said, when I found out my ex-wife was actually seeing a pastor, a divorced pastor, I was very shocked. I never anticipated that, not in the least. So basically what you'll find, Brandon, is that divorce changes people. And especially the way our system is right now, you get to lie and you have nothing that punishes you for perjury.
Yeah.
Perjury is basically accepted. Everybody knows that, well, there's always lying in family court. Okay, so now we're going to say lying is okay. But what happens is that the person who lies, it changes their character. And if you get away with a little lie here, it becomes a bigger lie and a bigger lie. And like I said, so that when my ex-wife went down and committed perjury in front of a judge down in Dallas, that could have changed my life. And I will say this, for the men that are watching, women, whatever it may be, you need to keep documentation. There was at one point I thought about just deleting everything, trying to wrap it up, put it behind me. I started to delete some emails, and then I stopped. And I thought, it reminded me from the military, Saddam Hussein destroying his own missiles before we went into to Iraq. I thought, now, way to go, Saddam, you've destroyed all your missiles, now we can just walk right in. And what I did not know, I never ever in my life expected a very good person to become committed to perjury, to doing evil things, and to justifying it, and to just making up lies. And that's what I find is very distressing with the church. The church, had they stood firm at the beginning, maybe it would not have gone this far. Now they're going to they're going to pretend like it's somebody else's fault, but really, and again, I'm not saying the church is responsible for this, but I think that the church, if it does not stand, it is failing society. I hope that maybe Ridgeview Church, I'd love to see Matt Geisinger come out right now and come on camera with him, but he won't. Last time he basically kicked me out, and like I said, if you ever come back here, I will have you arrested for trespassing. So there's a street between us, Matt. David, but anyway, that's really it. So
okay,
but so that people understand that church does fail quite a bit, and it's a shame, because the church should be standing up for marriage, should be standing up for the people of God, should be standing up for forgiveness, reconciliation, should be standing against divorce. Divorce, if done, is because of the hardness of heart. It's done because of sin. It is never in the plan originally. So that's it. Thanks so much.